and thank everybody for joining us today. This talk, Santa Barbara's Powerful Women, actually started off as a talk for the Santa Barbara Women's Club. Now, I know some of you out there think it's just the Rockwood Women's Club is a great place to get married and to have a party, or back when we could do those things. Or perhaps you know that it's just where all these supposed little old ladies get together to play bridge on Wednesdays. But the Santa Barbara Women's Club started off, first off as a club for women, then it became a study group, then it became a social group, then became a political group. And in the 1930s, they were the most powerful group in Santa Barbara. And so they have a phenomenal history. I wrote a history of them for their 100th anniversary for the Historical Museum. It's in one of their quarterlies. You can get that at the museum sometime. And I then started doing this talk about the Santa Barbara Women's Club, and then I started bringing in some of these singular women that changed Santa Barbara history. And so now I've divided it into two shows. I have one all about the Santa Barbara Women's Club and what they have done for our community, and on these unique Santa Barbara women. And there's quite a few women, and I've picked a handful that I have really liked. So we're going to meet a woman who held her ground against society's rules, and she suffered the ultimate fate, her death, for her beliefs. Probably we could look at her as one of the first feminists, and certainly a role model for today. We have two ladies that convinced a very stubborn and full of himself male to take their advice rather than his orders. And the result changed the outcome of the Mexican-American War in California and changed our state. We will meet another woman who had a little classroom in a church that evolved into a university, a woman who was amazed that our town didn't have a hospital, and another woman who took what was considered to be a man's job, and due to her careful watch, she saved hundreds of lives, and she served under 11 presidents before she retired at the age of 79. And there's so many more to come following those ladies. And so we'll start off with an article on the Santa Barbara Morning Press on January 1st, 1889. And it said, in front of Austin and Trenwith's grocery store on State Street yesterday, a young lady gave an excellent exhibition of horsemanship. The saddlecloth had slipped and the bronco reared and jumped for about several minutes before he was caught. During that time, this lady sat like a statue. In any place but Santa Barbara, the lady would have fainted. And that was, I thought, a delightful testimonial to the type of women that we have had in Santa Barbara, not content to be these meek behind the scenes ladies, but holding their own and doing what they seemed right. And so let's meet our first Santa Barbara powerful woman. Her name is Barbara, and we know her as Saint Barbara. There's many stories and legends about her, and while they differ on many points, they also agree on many. She was born sometime during the 3rd century in Asia Minor, and as was typical for her family, they were pagan in their beliefs. Her father was wealthy. He saw to it that Barbara was well educated. She had several tutors. She was supposedly drop dead gorgeous, by the way. And one of her tutors was a Christian, and he taught her about Christianity, which was highly illegal. And so she converted to the Christian faith. Now, her father had decided to add a tower to their home. And now some people claim that, or some accounts claim that this was to imprison Barbara until a proper suitor could be found for her. So she was to be locked away up in the tower. Well, while her father was away on the trip, she worked with the builders and the architects, whichever, to change the design from 2 windows to 3 windows to represent the Holy Trinity of the Christian faith. Now, eventually her father found out about her lack of faith toward the pagan gods. And so she was brought before the judge, the magistrate, and all those because it was against the law to be a Christian. And so she was taken to him to see if he could straighten her out because her father couldn't. So he thought perhaps talking to the judge and the town elders would change her mind. Well, they told her to renounce her faith, and she said, no, I believe in the one true God. And they said, well, that's too bad for you. So they sent her off to jail, where they tortured her and beat her and left her overnight. And during the night, she prayed for strength and she endured the pain, and she was comforted by angels who healed her wounds and took the pain away. In the morning, they brought her back before the magistrate, and they noticed that her body had been healed. And he said, "Rejoice, the pagan gods have decided to give you another chance. They have healed you, so be sure to tell us how much you love them." And she said, "No, there is only one God. There is my God, and you guys have face have fake idols before you." And so they were not happy with that answer. So they decided that she was to be tortured some more and then put to death. And so they took her back to jail and did horrible things to her. And so now she's condemned to death. And her father was given the honor of cutting off her head. So after another night in jail, she was taken up to a hillside where her father swung his mighty blade and completed the task of cutting off his own daughter's head, dying for her belief in her one true God rather than the pagan gods. As her father swung his sword and raised it above his head, though it was a clear day, two mighty bolts of lightning flashed from the heavens, and her father was struck by the lightning and killed, as was the judge that had ordered her execution. Now, according to this amazing photo of the incident, there's actually 4 lightning bolts coming down here, which sadly took out a golfer in the nearby Caesar Augustus Country Club. And actually, he'd missed his putt and let out a curse, and his curse was answered. And apparently, there was also a goat on the adjacent hillside that was taken out by these amazing bolt of lightning. Now, the first references to St. Barbara appear around the end of the 7th century, some 400 years after her death. And while she's generally thought of as a saint of the Catholic Church, she's actually venerated by the Greek and Russian Orthodox churches and several others. Now, she's usually depicted in front of a tower with 3 windows representing the Holy Trinity, like we can see in this image in front of us. And in her left hand, there's a palm branch, which is representing martyrdom. And in her right hand, she may hold the tower, like in this picture, or she may hold a chalice representing a happy death, or a sword, neither of which seem particularly indicative of a happy death, but that's how they portray her. Now, the name Santa Barbara was first given to the channel, not to this community, in 1602 by the Spanish explorer Sebastian Vizcaino. He entered the channel in early December 1602, and his ships encountered a very heavy fog, which cleared the following day, and they revealed 2 islands. The first was named San Nicolas for St. Nicholas, whose feast day was December 6th, and the second one was named for St. Barbara, whose feast day was celebrated on December 4th. And you can follow these explorers' trail up the California coast because of the feast day of all the saints. So all these different ports and islands were named for various saints on the Catholic calendar, and you can pretty much date his travels by going through that. Now, there is a delightful book about St. Barbara if you want to know a lot more. The Truth, Tales, Tidbits, and Trivia of Santa Barbara's Patron Saint by Aaron Graffy de Garcia. Might be related. I don't know, Aaron Graffy, not sure. But anyway, it's a delightful book. And so to find more about St. Barbara, you should pick up this book, available, I'm sure, at the Santa Barbara Historical Museum Library bookstore. Moving on to our next powerful women, and it starts off with this gentleman here, John C. Fremont. And it's, the story is that behind every successful man is a woman pushing him and prodding him the entire way. And certainly no finer example could be found than the woman on the right here, Jessie Benton Fremont. She was the wife of the great pathfinder, John C. Fremont. She was the daughter of the most powerful senator of the United States, Thomas Hart Benton, who was a senator from Missouri. And so her husband was with the Topographical Corps, and he was off mapping the west of America and turning in these somewhat boring reports to Congress about his adventures and what he was doing. And it was just top, whatever, we went here so many miles, did this so many miles. Well, she rewrote his military observations, and so we have pictures like this in some of the books. Here we have Fremont is meeting and making peace with the Indians. And indeed, he had his personal Cherokee guard that covered him. So this public back east that's fascinated with the American West is seeing this heroic, brave man with his mountain men behind him, Kit Carson and others. Here's Fremont planting the American standard on the Rocky Mountains. And so he's just seen as this national hero. So his boring reports are rewritten by his wife, and they just become the great celebration of the American soon to becoming frontier. And just to jump ahead in our story by a decade, in 1856, Jessie became the first presidential candidate's wife to actually play a part in a presidential campaign or a political campaign. When Fremont's name came up as a candidate for the first Republican Party election, she was part of it. The slogan was Fremont and Jessie too. So a very active, very influential woman, but she's not a Santa Barbara's powerful woman, but it's all going to work out, trust me. So meanwhile, let's go back to 1846. Fremont was on his expedition throughout the West, another expedition, and he'd come through California. He was now up in Oregon, and he happened to be he happened to be in the area just as the war between Mexico and the United States broke out. And so he quickly raised himself or became the head of a small army. And they started at San Juan Bautista at the mission up there. And so here they are. He's got all his men, all volunteers that came from all over to join to Fremont's battalion. And he was going through California to liberate it and set the American flag everywhere he could. So here's a delightful picture of him riding down a trail. And you can see right behind him is his famed Cherokee Guard that were very loyal to him and stayed at his side through all these campaigns. So he rolls into San Luis Obispo in December of 1846, and there is a San Luis Obispo mission where they set up their headquarters. Now, in San Luis Obispo, they had captured the alcalde, Jose de Jesus Pico, and Pico had what they called broken his parole. He had said that he would not take up arms against the Americans. He'd just sit this thing out, sort of like a Switzerland, and let's see what happens and just stay out of the way. But they had found secret dispatches that he had been sending with reports on American movements. So he was branded as having broken his parole, which was not seen as a good thing. And so Fremont sentenced him to death. Well, on the morning of the supposed execution, one of Fremont's men wrote this, December 17th, 1846. While standing in the corridor this morning, a procession of females passed by me, headed by a lady of fine appearance and dressed with remarkable taste and neatness. All the others had their faces covered, but this woman, not this beautiful woman, she spoke for all the women, and Fremont was so impressed with her eloquence that he pardoned Pico, and Jose de Jesus Pico rode with Fremont for the rest of the war. And so who was this woman? Well, she was Doña Maria Ramona Carrillo Pacheco Wilson. She was born in San Diego in 1811 to a presidial soldier. She married the dashing Lieutenant Romualdo Pacheco in 1826. And in 1829, he was sent to the Santa Barbara Presidio. And later, a few years later, was assigned to be the commandant of the San Francisco Presidio. Meanwhile, there was a fight between a former California governor, Echeandia, and the governor, Manuel Victoria, the current governor, Manuel Victoria, from whom we have Victoria Street, by the way. And the two governors, or one ex-governor, current governor, met at the Kowanga Pass, and their armies decided to fight it out. Since everybody was actually related, nobody really wanted to fight it out. They just sort of sat there and yelled insults at each other. And one of them declared, "I do not lead men who wear petticoats." And so Pacheco decided he was on Victoria's side, the current governor. So because of that insult, he decided to charge across the plain and was met by another guy who shot and killed him. And so now Mrs. Pacheco became a widow with two small children. So at the age of 20, she was a widow. She moved in with the De La Guerra family here in Santa Barbara. And later she married a Scottish sea captain, John Wilson, and she died in 18 1861. But the most important thing is her words, which so impressed Fremont, and he spared Pico's life, would have further impact on the state, on our future state of California. And just for an aside, this is her son, Romualdo Pacheco, who would become California's first native-born governor in 1875. And here she is, Mrs. Pacheco, Carrillo Pacheco Wilson in San Luis Obispo, where she died in 1861. So back to Fremont with Pico riding at his side now. They came through the Santa Ynez Mountains. We all know the story of Fremont and the San Marcos Pass. And so during a huge storm, they came over the Santa Ynez Mountains and came into Santa Barbara on Christmas Eve of 1846. They captured the empty town of Santa Barbara, and Fremont's brilliant military strategy was ridiculed by one of his men, who said, the enemy, who's leisurely abandoned and retired from Santa Barbara a week before, failed to be surprised because they have no knowledge of the requirements of military strategy. So they were off fighting to the south. And the people in Santa Barbara were astounded beyond measure of the madness of Fremont's venture coming over the hilltop, the mountaintop. So Fremont took his headquarters at the Thompson Adobe at the future intersection of State and De La Guerra Street. And Fremont was ready to put harsh laws over the town of Santa Barbara, because previously the residents and troops had thrown out some troops that Fremont had left behind to take over the town when they passed through earlier in September. So he's about to put harsh treatment on the town of Santa Barbara when there's news of a woman who wants to talk to Fremont. And this woman lived just a few doors up from the Thompson Adobe in the 800 block of State Street. Here's her adobe. And her name was Bernarda Ruiz. Bernarda Ruiz was born in Santa Barbara in 1815 to a presidial soldier. And at age 15, she married Jose Jesus Rodriguez, also a presidial soldier. And he passed away, leaving her with a bunch of kids. And she took back her married name, and she bought the adobe that we saw on the 800 block of State Street. So Fremont's men said, hey, there's this woman that wants to talk to you. And he said, I'm not going to talk to some woman. I've got my plans, and this is how it's going to go. However, Jose de Jesus Pico, who had been spared thanks to the work of Ramona Pacheco Wilson, Pico is a personal friend and a relative of Bernarda Ruiz. And so he says, this woman carries a lot of weight in Santa Barbara. She's highly thought of and highly regarded. You actually ought to listen to her. So Fremont said, I'll give her 10 minutes. She was talking to Fremont for 2 hours, and she sat with him and asked him if she suggested that he make a generous peace, and said, why do you want to make these people your enemy? You have come through here. There's been no bloodshed. And now you want to take away all the weapons that are here. You want to take away the livelihood for the men to protect their homes, to hunt and get food. Nobody here has done you wrong. So why not make peace and be hailed as a generous and liberal and friend of the people rather than an enemy? And so he said, all right. So he took her advice, and then from what I understand, she then accompanied him as he headed south. So we have Pico and Bernarda Ruiz both heading south with Fremont to meet the enemy, which was also, once again, at that famed Kowanga Pass. And so we have here Fremont meeting the general of the California Army, the Californios, which was Andres Pico, and we have San Andres Street named for him. And as the negotiations were being done, we had Pico, his brother, Jose de Jesus Pico, and we have Bernarda Ruiz, and they worked together and drafted the Treaty of Kowanga, which was one, instead of being a harsh document of surrender, this was seen as one of the freest and greatest surrender documents. It pardoned all the combatants in California. They were pardoned. They were free to return to their homes. They got to keep their weapons, and they had all the privileges of American citizenship, though they still weren't a state or anything, but they were given all the privileges without having to take an oath of allegiance or anything else. And anybody that wanted to leave Santa Barbara or leave California and go to Mexico was free to pass. And all of this thanks to the intersection of Bernarda Ruiz and Ramona Pacheco Carrillo Pacheco de Wilson. And in a sense, I think one of the reasons that Fremont listened to these two women was because he had a strong woman at home that had pretty much put him where he was, Jessie Benton Fremont. And so I think that he would listen when he met strong women. He listened to them. And these two women came across and they changed the course of California history. Now we have San Nicolas Island. And so here's Santa Barbara, Santa Cruz, Anacapa that we all see. And way the heck out here, some 65 miles from Santa Barbara, is San Nicolas Island. It's only about 3.5 miles wide, 10 miles long, 22 square miles or something altogether. And in 1835, the Chumash Indians, or the whatever Indians, there seems to be some discussion about which Indian tribes they were, but nevertheless, the Indians on the island had been attacked, the men killed by the Kodiak Indians that were being left on the island by Russian otter hunters and fur traders. So they were bringing these Indians down, they were killing off the men, having their way with the women. And so for the protection of the remaining Indians on the island, a boat was chartered to remove them all and bring them back to the mainland. And the story goes, as the ship was leaving, a woman discovered that her young child was not aboard the ship. And so she jumped off the ship and ran ashore to try to find her child and bring it back. A storm was brewing, and the ship decided the captain decided, if we pull back in, we'll never be able to get back out again. We'll be dashed to the rocks here. So they took off, sailed back to the mainland, and the Indians were then released to the missions there. And this woman was left behind. Several of the men on the boat had always felt bad about this, and it was long known that there had been a woman left behind, but no one was ever able to get back out to the island again. So it wasn't until some 18 years later, some 18 years later, and there was talks about the wild woman of San Nicolas that still lived there. A few hunters had come out to the island over the years, and they found footprints, and they found some evidence of this woman. And it wasn't until the 1850s that Captain George Nidever returned to the island with some otter hunters. They saw her footprints, and they noticed that they were fresh footprints. They couldn't find her, but they came back a year later and they finally saw her. And so they didn't approach her, try to scare her. They just stayed there and stayed away, but left, I think, food out for her. And so eventually she came closer, and they were able to, through sign language and communication, say that they would take her back to the mainland, back to Santa Barbara. And so she agreed, and so they brought her back. And these are drawings of what her life may have been like on the island. So there's Captain George Nidever and his wife, Sinifrosa. And so they brought the lone woman back to Santa Barbara, and she didn't last too long. She arrived in Santa Barbara in September of 1853 and died not long afterwards. And she had been staying with the Nidevers on what is now the Lower East Side, and there's a Juana Maria Street down there named for her. She was baptized at the old mission and given the Christian name of Juana Maria. And about a month after she came back to Santa Barbara, was brought back to the mainland, she died in October 19th, 1853. And they never were able to find out what language. The Chumash that they brought around did not understand her language. There was a few words that people sort of understood, but I understand that recently more work has been done, and there's been a new paper out, which I haven't seen, that suggests that which tribe of California Indians that she had belonged to, most likely, unlikely, who knows for sure. But she died and was buried at Mission Santa Barbara. The Daughters of the American Revolution put up a plaque to her on the wall. Her gravesite is not known. Like most of the graves at the Santa Barbara Mission, very few have been marked. Most of them are unmarked graves. So there is a plaque towards her. Some of the things that they brought back to the mainland with her, there was this twined basket water bottle, And so that was brought back with her. And it was in San Francisco in 1906 when the earthquake struck and it was destroyed in the fire. And so that disappeared. Supposedly a feathered cape of some kind or a shawl that she had was taken to the Vatican Museum, and Marla Daly of the Santa Cruz Island Foundation and others have tried to find this and see if it's in catalog, but there's no record of it. So that part of her has disappeared. This supposedly is a photograph of Juana Maria, the lone woman of San Nicolas Island. The back of the photo has Hayward and Mazzal on it as the photographers. They weren't around in Santa Barbara until 1875. And so since this was 1853, hard to think that they could have taken the picture. It's possible that they made a copy of an existing picture. This original picture was brought to the Santa Barbara Historical Museum by the woman who was the curator at the time for the museum, and she got it through her family connections. And it's marked on the back, Juana Maria, the lone woman of San Nicolas Island. But I don't think it is personally, because when she got to Santa Barbara, news would have been sent to San Francisco. There was nobody with a camera in Santa Barbara. So someone would have to send a notice up to San Francisco, get a photographer up there to come down to Santa Barbara, take the picture. And I've never seen anything in the San Francisco newspaper saying, hey, so-and-so, the photographer, got to Santa Barbara and took a picture of the lone woman, because her rescue was news. People were aware of her and very excited about this, but there's never anything mentioned about a photograph being taken. So maybe it is. I don't actually think it is. A number of books can be found about her story. The Life and Adventures of George Nidever tells his story about her. Another one, a little exaggerated perhaps, called 18 Years Alone. There's another fine publication, Original Accounts of the Lone Woman of San Nicolas Island. And these are from all the different people that were on the boat that were on the ship that rescued her, and what their story is, and the people that originally had left her on the island. And then, of course, there's the one that we all pretty much know, Scott Odell's Island of the Blue Dolphins. So all of these would be fascinating readings to find out more about the lone woman of San Nicolas Island. Now, for many years, the top landmarks in Santa Barbara were, of course, Mission Santa Barbara, the famed Castle Rock down along West Beach, and where the Castle Rock is, right here, this is now the entrance to the breakwater where the two white pillars are. So Castle Rock, the old mission, and a lady lighthouse keeper. And here we have a postcard of the lighthouse and the oldest woman tender in the United States near Santa Barbara, California. Well, the woman's name was Julia Williams, and she didn't start off as being the lady lighthouse keeper for Santa Barbara. Her husband had come to California for the gold rush, and she followed. And hearing about a lighthouse being planned for Santa Barbara in 1856, he applied for the job, and the family moved. And with Julia pregnant with her third child, they came to Santa Barbara, and they finally moved into the completed lighthouse in December of 1856. Well, it turned out Albert didn't really like the job of being the Santa Barbara lighthouse keeper, and so he quit and tried his hand at farming and painting. And several other lighthouse keepers came and went and just didn't stick with the job, obviously. So Julie applied for the job, and she got it in 1865. Now, a lot of times it's said that Julia Williams was paid half of what the men got, and that's not true. She got the $750 a month that most lighthouse keepers got, and so she was paid the regular wage that everybody else got. Being the lighthouse keeper on the Mesa was a long ways away from Santa Barbara. There was actually barely anything that could be considered a road leading from the Mesa back down to Santa Barbara. So it was a long trek to get from the Mesa down to Santa Barbara to get provisions, bring them back, whatever you didn't have. So this is what's probably now Lighthouse Road, heading over towards what would become future Meigs Road, and over the hill down to Santa Barbara. So there's the lighthouse, probably in the 1880s. And so nearly every night for some 40 years, she climbed these stairs, these narrow stairs, to light the lamp. And remind you, she's been pregnant at least 2 more times since this happened, climbing the stairs, and she only missed 2 nights. Now, the legend says she missed the 2 nights because she gave birth. But what I had found was that she gave birth 3 times, and the 2 nights that she missed the lighting the light was because she stayed in town for the wedding of 2 of her boys. So I'm not sure who lit the light while she wasn't there, but that's a pretty darn good track record. If you think of trudging yourself up and down those stairs, even if I wasn't pregnant, I'd be getting tired of that pretty quickly. Well, although she wasn't the only lady lighthouse keeper that America had, but she was celebrated on postcards, magazine articles, and a high point to any tourist visit was to visit this lady lighthouse keeper and get your photo taken with her. And so there she is on the front steps, and she always kept a very nice garden around the house. And here's a group of people coming out to the lighthouse, getting their picture taken. And another view with the arbor and everything else. What we don't see on the other side, of course, indoor plumbing was a long way off. So there was two outhouses off to the back side of the lighthouse. Well, so celebrated was Julia Williams that when Theodore Roosevelt visited Santa Barbara in 1903, she was one of the distinguished citizens presented to him at the Plaza Del Mar. And here we can see Teddy Roosevelt. And somewhere in the crowd, I have found her before. I found somewhere in here is Julia Williams, presented as a distinguished citizen to the president. Now, at that time, she had served her duties under 11 presidents. Long time holding the job. Well, in December of 1905, she was 79 years old. She finally had to retire because she fell down and she broke her hip. And she died at Cottage Hospital in 1911. And as for the lighthouse, well, it stood for a few more years until 1925 when the Santa Barbara earthquake took it down. And the lighthouse is just about across from the school along the Shoreline Drive there, and across from the park. And we want to put a plaque up in the park to Julia Williams. I'd love to put up a little monument of the lighthouse and maybe her in front of it or something, but at least a plaque honoring Julia Williams close to the location where the lighthouse actually was. The current lighthouse is far down below where the original one had stood. Our next powerful woman would be Sarah Plummer. And Sarah Plummer, she had been an artist and a teacher in New York, and she came to Santa Barbara in 1869 to recuperate from pneumonia. And she was surprised when she got here that Santa Barbara didn't have a public library or even a bookstore. And so she wrote to some friends back east, and she got a bunch of books. And so she opened the first lending library in Santa Barbara. And for $5 a year, you got 2 books for 2 weeks, and you had to bring them back and do it again. So here's her advertisement in the 1871 Santa Barbara Daily News, and inviting people to come out to her store. Here's the interior of her store, a very, very rare photograph. And so it was on State Street. And after a while, Colonel William Wells Hollister, our leading citizen, helped to build the International Order of Oddfellows Hall at the corner of Haley and State Street. And so he decided to build a library in there. And so he bought all of Sarah Plummer's books and moved them to the upper floor of the Oddfellows Hall at Haley and State Street there. And here's an interior shot of what it looked like. Now, as for Sarah Plummer, so she retired as the town's librarian, as it were, and continued with her bookstore for a while. But then she got married, and she was an avid botanist. She just loved her plants. And so she met and she married another botanist, a man named John Gill Lemon. And here's a picture of the married couple together and a little bit about their marriage ceremony. Now, the marriage was a perfect partnership because she was an artist. And so she was the artist for his writings and his narratives, even though she's a highly regarded author in her own right and had published a number of books. I think Western marine algae and ferns were two of the things that she was really top notch on. So it was a beautiful partnership between the two of them. And on their honeymoon, they went to Arizona to the Santa Catalina Mountains, where she climbed this 9,000-foot mountain back here in the background. And she was the first woman to do so. And so hence it's now has the name Mount Lemmons. So if you've ever been there, it's former Santa Barbara librarian and book owner, Sarah Plummer. And she has yet another piece of distinguished actions to her record. In the 1890s, there was a competition to be held for the state flower. Sarah Plummer Lemon was a champion for the golden poppy, and she actually wrote the wording for the bill that was passed by the legislature, and so the California poppy became California's state flower, all thanks to Sarah Plummer. This is Dr. Harriet Belcher. Now, she graduated, she was 25 years old. She graduated from the Women's Medical School in Philadelphia and set up her practice in Rhode Island. And Santa Barbara did have a female doctor at that time who retired around 1882. And so at the far end of America, Rhode Island, somehow Harriet Belcher finds out about this woman in Santa Barbara retiring. And so she came all the way from Rhode Island out to Santa Barbara to set up a practice here. And the newspapers, this is Santa Barbara around that time, 1882, and the newspapers reported that a lady physician has established herself here in Santa Barbara, and she's going to occupy the office formerly used by Mrs. Dr. Stewart. Should she prove as capable in her profession as her predecessor, her success in Santa Barbara is assured, and we're informed this should be the case. See her card, which has been posted in the paper today. Just for the fun here, we have Mission Santa Barbara. We have the St. Vincent's Orphanage still over on De La Vina Street, Presbyterian Church on State Street, just below Anapamu. And now we have Dr. Belcher's card. At this time, she was opposite the Clock Building, which would have been on Carrillo and State Street. And so it was kind of funny because the newspaper didn't quite know what to call her. They called her Miss Dr. Belcher, Mrs. Dr. Belcher, and finally they just called her Dr. Belcher. They got rid of the Miss or the Mrs. I don't know why they had to throw that in front of it. They never called anybody Mr. Dr. Spalding or Mr. Dr. Coper. It was always Dr. Doctor, but for the women, they always had to seem to toss in the Mrs. or Miss to let you know that they were married or single doctors. So she rented this house, which was next to the Presbyterian Church on State Street, just about at 1129 State Street, where the San Marcos building is. So this was just a little bit past that. So there's her house. And so in 1884, she leased that house for a while. Now, Dr. Belcher was an avid horsewoman, and she was known as the lady doctor on horseback. And so she would ride all over Santa Barbara. People came to her house, or she would ride as the emergency needed to wherever she had to go. She became involved with Santa Barbara's first mounted review. She was a captain, the only female captain, and leading a brigade of horsemen down State Street. It was a great example. There was some 78 horses. And this is kind of funny too. The newspapers used to report everything in detail. So all 78 people that were in this mounted review, all were listed, many of them with the colors they were wearing and the names of all their horses. Later in 1886, they started the Pioneer Riding Club, and Dr. Belcher, not a male, Dr. Belcher was the first president of the Pioneer Riding Club of Santa Barbara. So highly regarded for her skills as a doctor and as a horse person. And this may be her this is supposedly Garden Street, supposedly Dr. Belcher. So riding wherever she could to take care of Santa Barbara's patients. And she was a godsend for Santa Barbara women because many of them did not really feel comfortable going to a male doctor during pregnancy or having complications. And having a female doctor was very comforting for them. 1986, she bought and she built a house on West Victoria Street, just past Chapala. And 6 months later, she was diagnosed with heart disease. She had surgery for the heart disease and a second surgery, and she died in May of 1887. She was only 45 years old. Now, she was an avid believer in cremation, not burial, and she was one of the people in the California Cremation Society that was trying to get people to get cremated rather than being buried. But when she died, her friends erected a tombstone for her. She was actually given a plot in the Oliver family's plot, and so she sort of had a borrowed area of the Santa Barbara Cemetery, which they put her. And her tombstone just says so much. At the very bottom here, it says Dr. Harriet Belcher, where she was born, date. At the bottom, it just says, much beloved. And I just think that says so much about this woman. She was only here for 5 years, and what a impact she made on the community, that everybody got together, made a headstone, bought a headstone for her, and titled her as much beloved. And just sort of here as a side note, the Oliver family that we mentioned, this is the Oliver family rock at the corner of Mountain Drive and Los Olivos. And this little area here, Rocky Nook Park, was actually what the Oliver family called their little ranch there, which was called Rocky Nook. So moving onward. This woman is Mary Ashley. She came to Santa Barbara in 1869. Her husband died in 1876, and she was once again appalled, as other people were when they came to Santa Barbara and found us lacking so many of the things that they were used to back east. She was appalled that we didn't have a hospital or proper medical facility. And so Mary Ashley and a bunch of other women got together and decided it was time to have a hospital. And this is the Santa Barbara Cottage Hospital. What started off with, there was ladies of 6 different church societies decided that, yes, we must have the funds for a city hospital. Mrs. Ashley had been present for all these different meetings. And so the original idea was each one of these 6 different church societies were going to raise the money to furnish one room of the hospital. And supposedly the legend is that Cottage Hospital took its name because there was going to be individual cottages on the property, and so one for childbirth, one for kids, one for whatever. So each problem or each type of illness or surgery had its own cottage. And the rumor then is that the architect, Peter Barber, told them it's going to be too expensive to have all these cottages. You need to have a single building. And so they said, okay, but they loved the name, and so they kept Cottage Hospital. I've not seen anything in print or in notes anywhere that say that that's how it happened. But that's the legend. So these women got together. There was a number of meetings, and eventually there were some 176 women all involved with trying to get this hospital done. So on April 16th of 1888, the Santa Barbara Cottage Hospital was incorporated. They came up with their mission statement, a very simple one. I was sick and he visited me, which is out of the book of Matthew. And we have the president, Mrs. Mary Ashley, and we see the leading ladies of Santa Barbara all involved as the first board members. Well, so they had a great name, and they had a great mission statement and motto, but they had no land, and they had no building, and they still had no money. They just had, that's all they had. So they went out to the community and said, we need land and we need money. So a number of people, here's a look at Santa Barbara, and quite a few people responded with property for them. A man named Hawley, who owned a good portion of the upper Riviera here, he said he would give them some 6 acres of land, and he would give them a year's free of all the material that they need. He would pay for that. And however, it was at the, this far edge of town, kind of going up a hillside here. And so that got turned down. And so they're trying to, the cost of construction was $6,000. And so the ladies were trying to figure out, how do we get $6,000? And well, probably was their first planned or rather unplanned gift A woman back east in New York named Leonora Bowles passed away, and she left this Cottage Hospital Society $1,000, 1/6 of what they needed. I'm not sure what her connection to Santa Barbara was. I haven't uncovered that yet, but she heard of the need, and so $1,000 came to the Cottage Hospital Society. So they got part of what they need. Then a man named William Woodbridge, who was a realtor in town, and we may add that his wife Jane was one of the board members. He came up with a piece of property for them, and I think with his wife pushing the way, he gave it to them at a greatly reduced rate. And so they got this little piece that I've marked in green here, and this was at the corner of Junipero and Castillo. And the town actually ended, the city limits were at Mission Street. So here's Mission Street here. Mission Street, let's see, yes, Mission Street right there. And so here we are in the middle of nowhere. There's orchards all around it. There's no paved road. There's no streetcar. So you had to ride a horse or a carriage to get out there. Also at this location, there was no water, there was no gas or electricity. And actually Junipero Street didn't even exist. It was up here and down there, and this was still empty land. It hadn't been opened up yet as a street. So that's what they got. So how are they going to raise money? Well, they had a few people that were doing poetry readings, singing, doing various things at 25 cents, 50 cents admission, and they were raising money off of that. And so they thought, well, what can we do for a big shebang to get the money we need? And so they decided to hold a carnival, a 5-day carnival at the Opera House, which was known as the Liberos Theater. And there's the Liberos Theater. And so they had a amazing carnival there, and they put out a daily newspaper, the Carnival Daily, for 5 days. And all through the Libero, they set up all these different booths. And so there was a Swiss cottage booth, there was a Russian booth, a Turkish booth, an American booth. They had all these different booths with various things relating to the nationality. Somewhat. The Russian booth, for example, sold $105 worth of ice cream, and they ran out on the second day. The Turkish booth, called the Ladies of the Harem, they sold cigarettes and coffee, probably the first and only time Cottage Hospital made money off of cigarettes. There was a Swiss cottage that raised $37 in lemonade. And this newspaper was sold at 5 cents a copy. And on just one day alone, they sold 300 copies, which was 5% of Santa Barbara's population. So everybody was really contributing. You can see all the different leading merchants here in Santa Barbara contributing money for the hospital, or hoping to. So through this 5-day carnival, they raised $2,700, which was $700.53 over what they needed. So now they had the money, and they started finishing the building. And so in December 8th of 1891, the new Cottage Hospital opened for Santa Barbara. And here, dressed in white on the front, is the first superintendent, Dr. Jane Spalding. And the first 2 patients were women. The first year, the income was $2,103.79. And their expenditures were $2,103.28, which was a profit of 51 cents for their first year alone. Now, the hospital had no gas, electricity, or water, so they had to drill a well and get the water. They manufactured gas in the basement. To sterilize the instruments, they were boiled in the kitchen. They had boiling water in there, so the instruments were put into there. And for the patients, they also sterilized bandages, etc., by boiling them in the cauldrons in the kitchen. They also had to hand carry patients from the surgery area, which was on this side here, up to the rooms either back here or up on the second floor. And it wasn't until a few years later that somebody donated an elevator so that they could get the patients safely without having to carry them. Imagine coming out of surgery and being carried by hand up 2 flights of stairs. So here's the hospital with the water tower in the background. And by now you can see I very carefully hand colored these poles. So that's electrical poles for the Santa Barbara trolley system. So now the trolleys were coming out to Cottage Hospital, and so you didn't have to wait for a bicycle or a carriage and horse to bring you out there. You could jump on the streetcar. Now, this nice little orchard right here was walnut trees, and you can remember that there was walnut trees there because if you ever go to Cottage, right here, there's a street now called Nogales, which means walnut trees in Spanish. So the old orchard is remembered from that. So here's the hospital, and with this quarter of a block that they bought, and eventually they started adding more portions, this quarter of the block, that quarter of the block, this quarter of the block, and started getting more land. Well, by 1900, the population was 6,500 in Santa Barbara, and so the hospital was already starting to get a little bit overgrown. There was too many patients and not enough rooms. And so they started thinking about building a new hospital. And it wasn't until the early 1910, 1911 that they started trying to get the funding for it. And so they knew a new building was estimated to cost some $50,000. And they certainly weren't going to get that money just from carnival tickets at 50 cents, 50 cents a ticket, or ice cream, tamales, coffee, or cigarettes. So it turned out that a woman, Mrs. Petty Franklin, widow of William Franklin, she had been at Cottage Hospital, and the result of it changed her will. She had intended to give $30,000 to the Santa Barbara Cemetery to build a memorial chapel for herself and her husband and 3 of their deceased children. And instead, she changed her will to give the $30,000 to the Cottage Hospital, and she wasted no time in dying and getting the money to Cottage Hospital. And so here in late 1912, we can see the new Cottage Hospital starting to arise. There's the old Cottage Hospital back here at Castillo and Junipero Street. This is Pueblo, the dirt Pueblo Street here in the front, and the hospital under construction. July of 1913, the new Cottage Hospital opened, and Pueblo Street is still a dirt street here. And so what we have here, what I just think is so cool is that Mrs. Franklin's generosity. So instead of building a monument to death for 5 people, it instead became a gift of life for thousands. And so once again, due to a woman coming to the rescue, and we now had a new Cottage Hospital. And Cottage Hospital, of course, has grown and grown. There's a whole nother lesson with philanthropy, and I have a talk about the philanthropy of Cottage Hospital. We'll do some other time. Instead, we're going to leave Cottage Hospital in 1913 and move on to this woman here. This is Anna S.C. Blake. And Anna S.C. Blake was an advocate for the manual training system, or the Sloyd schools, as they called it, the Sloyd method, which was developed in Sweden. Well, she had come to Santa Barbara and built a home on Constance Street, and you can see it there in the trees. St. Anthony Seminary just being built here. So this picture's around 1899 to 1901. So she built her home called El Mirador, and it's just where Anacapa Street dead ends to Constance. So her home was up in right off of that area there. This is what it looked like. And so she decided that she wanted to start this school in Santa Barbara, and this Sloyd School of Manual Training. And what the manual training sort of meant was that they taught you industrial arts. It taught you how to do woodworking. It taught you how to do pottery. It was supposed to be, for girls, cooking. So they would learn how to cook and sew and do those things. But boys could also learn those things, and girls could also learn the carpentry, from what I understand. So it was more than just reading, writing, and arithmetic. It was the practical use of your hands and how to build, to construct, and to cook. The first place she had was in the old Congregational Church near the corner of Santa Barbara and Ortega Streets. And she had one room in the former church, and that was December of 1892. And they also had the Oddfellows Lodge that we had seen earlier, where the Sarah Plummer's library got moved at the corner of State and Haley. So they had cooking classes at the Oddfellows Lodge, and they had the manual training for the carpentry and other activities in one of the rooms of the church. And in no time at all, Miss Blake then built the Sloyd School at 816 Santa Barbara Street. And 816 Santa Barbara Street is now the Anacapa School. There's two barracks that are from the former Hospital, a whole nother story. But this is what the Sloyd School looked like. It opened in the summer of 1893. And here we have some of the classes inside. We can see them doing woodworking inside. They called it domestic science, was the fancy name for it. And they had somewhere between 64 to 380 students, depending on the time of the year. And so this was the first such school dealing with the manual arts and training on the West Coast. So quite the innovation that Santa Barbara, this small little community, would take this before San Francisco, Los Angeles, or someplace else. Here's some of the boys with their finished products at the Sloyd School. And there's a number of different stories of some of these kids talking about their experiences there. And so they all thought it was a great idea to be able to do something with their hands. And especially the cooking and sewing was also seemed to be a good thing for them to learn as well. Unfortunately, Anna Blake did not live to see the seed that she had planted with her first school. She was diagnosed with cancer and she died in 1898 or 1899. And there's her headstone at the Santa Barbara Cemetery. Her replacement was a woman named Edna Rich. Edna Rich was a local girl born in 1871. She was really brilliant. She was age 17 and she passed the county teacher's exam and she had the highest marks that had been recorded. Anna Blake met her, thought she was stupendous, and she sent her back east to Boston to learn the Sloyd School method, then sent her to Sweden and to London and to Amsterdam and to Germany to continue to learn and get more acquainted with the system. Then she came back to Boston and then came to Santa Barbara and became principal of the school, but just before Miss Blake's death in 1899. Edna Rich got the city to buy property on West Victoria Street, just in from Chapala, probably just about the same area that Dr. Harriet Belcher's house had been at. So she got the city to buy this property. They built in 1909 what they called the Santa Barbara State Normal School of the Manual Arts and Home Economics. I mean, that's a long title to say. And despite the fact that she didn't actually have any college degrees, she was named the head of the State Normal School and named to this California State Board of Education. So, you know, highly recognized for her intelligence and for her achievements. By 1909, this had just been built, and a few years later, they had outgrown this, and so a new campus was created up on the Riviera in 1913, and so there's the State Normal School. Now, one of the most beautiful drives in Santa Barbara is that nice curve as you come past the Mission and you go up Alameda Padre Serra, and so that delightful curve is all there because of Edna Rich and this school that she built. They wanted to get the streetcar to go up to the State Normal School so kids could get up there. And the streetcar could not just climb the hill straight up, going along Los Olivos Street, for example, and then just heading straight up the hill. The streetcar did not have the power to do that. It had to have a certain percentage of a grade for the car to go up. And so that's why they created that nice slope that comes down and curves and then ends just towards the back side of the Mission there. So that whole grade created just so the streetcars could get up there. So this is the dedication day. We can see a streetcar here across from the State Normal School. And all the distinguished people have gotten out as they get to view Edna Rich driving the last spike into the rails there for the Santa Barbara electric trolley system going up to the state school, up to the School of the Manual Arts and Training. Then it got a new name. It was just simply the State Normal School. And then they did a little bit of remodeling for it. It became the State Teachers College. And that arbor that we saw, we'll back up here, that nice square arbor you see here, got modified. And it's got all these nice arches and new improved stairways going up. And it became the California State Teachers College. In turn, it became the University of Santa Barbara College, UCSBC. They outgrew this campus. They then opened the campus on the foot of the Mesa, which is now Santa Barbara City College. And eventually, After the war, the former Marine base became now the full-fledged University of California at Santa Barbara. All started from that little seed that Anna Blake started in a back room of the old Congregational Church. And so thanks to her and to Edna Rich, we have this campus. And this ends the story of Santa Barbara's powerful women, but there's yet one more. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're saying, Neal, it must be her. No, it's not her. That her that we are referring to, she was on my news press route, and she never tipped me. And so, as I always tell my audiences, I never bring her up because she never tipped, so I don't talk. So instead, we have, I think, one of Santa Barbara's very powerful women, my mother, Jane Graffy. Jane Graffy was on the PTA for several schools. She was also a den mother for my Cub Scout troop. And with that background, people said, my God, Jane, you should be on the Planning Commission. If you can take care of Cub Scouts and live, Planning Commission would be fine. So she was on the Santa Barbara Planning Commission. She ran then for city council. Her friend Sheila Lodge said, Jane, move up to the council. So she ran for council. She served 3 terms in the city council. She was also the second district, got elected to the Board of Supervisors for the 2nd district. She was very instrumental in helping to clean up the Arroyo Burro Creek. And she also was there to get the creation for the Douglas Preserve. And she was also responsible for trying to put the limit of 80,000 for a cap for Santa Barbara's growth to keep the city from growing beyond our means and what was available for the city. She also did the downsizing for the city, which was seen by many as horrible, to try and limit the growth of the city, and was on more boards. We could do an entire hour of the different boards. She was on the Cottage Hospital board for many years. And so she had a great career of community service. And more importantly, she helped my father there on the right raise 5 happy, successful children. And so I thank Jane Graffy, one of Santa Barbara's powerful women, for who I am today and making me available to give this presentation to you. So Daisha, we'll go right back over to you. I want to thank everybody for listening in, and enjoy March, Women's Month. It should, as my mother said, it should be Women's Year, not Women's Month. Okay, thank you.